Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Avenged Sevenfold record, Life is But a Dream. Look, no matter how many blockbuster tier albums that Avenged Sevenfold put out, they are always going to have a rocky relationship, shall we say, with the metal community at large. I mean, sure, some metal publications like Loudwire will devour anything that Avenged Sevenfold put out like it's water from the fountain of youth, when, ironically, both Loudwire and Avenged Sevenfold are at times laughably outdated. And the truth is that no matter what the band do, they're seemingly always going to come across as a product of the 2000s melodic metal scene more than anything that really has any lasting impact. I mean, sure, Avenged Sevenfold were popular, and they're still very popular now, but you know what else was popular when it came out? Disco Duck by Rick Dees. I think you understand the point that I'm trying to make here. Not everything that's popular ages well, even if it continues to be popular decades after it started. Even the band's fairly major 2016 comeback album, The Stage, which was shockingly progressive metal oriented more than anything else, and a solid album as a whole, was not really capable of swaying a lot of metalheads, a lot of pre-established haters of Avenged Sevenfold, and understandably so. They had released a number of albums before The Stage that were weak or downright horrible at times, and looking at you, Hail to the King, there have been a lot of bad Avenged Sevenfold albums, and it's kind of easy to understand where a lot of metalheads are coming from and not liking them, but at the same time, it's kind of easy to understand the appeal, too. I mean, hey, their music is generally well structured, it's energetic, and their metalcore origins definitely give them some brownie points for the more pretentious niches of the metal community as a whole. My point is, it may not be your thing, it certainly isn't my thing, but Avenged Sevenfold do have their credit. It's just that that always doesn't work out, seemingly. Another great example of that credit really not amounting to much at all is their latest studio album, Life is But a Dream, which seemingly wants to be a touch of everything to appeal to as many loud music fans as possible, but it just ultimately winds up being a complete and total mess in the end, which is a shame because there is real potential here. It's just completely squandered. I mean, it really does feel like Avenged Sevenfold just had no idea what they wanted this album to be while they were in the process of making it. Now, for context, the promotion of Life is But a Dream seemed to imply that it was kind of sort of an avant-garde metal experience from Avenged Sevenfold, and I mean, hey, they put out a prog metal album that was actually pretty decent, so what the hell? Avenged Sevenfold can do whatever they want, and maybe they'll do it well. Now, while Avenged Sevenfold could arguably pull off an album full of Voivod worship and Into the Pandemonium era Celtic Frost impressions, their latest album just kind of feels like it has a lot of influences and no idea what to do with any of them. For example, the album opening song Game Over has this sort of crossover thrash feel to it that's not too terribly distant from a band like Cryptic Slaughter, but then just a few songs later you have the track We Love You, which has this sort of stomp clap along segue as well as an acoustic bit to act as the majority of the outro, and that's not to mention a variety of other factors about this record that just don't make sense in the context of a singular listening experience. Perhaps the biggest of all of these comes primarily in the second half of the record when a huge amount of auto-tune is placed over frontman M. Shadows' vocal work. And while I have nothing against auto-tune being used in the context of metal, it can work well from time to time, it takes any and all integrity out of songs like Ordinary, what little integrity they had left besides being already dry, unfocused songs. This is already boring musicianship done by people who already have no idea of what they want a single track to be, let alone a full album, and adding a huge amount of auto-tune to the vocal work just further develops the fact that this has no singular identity, and that's a bad thing. Oddly enough, I think I would actually have less of an issue with the auto-tune here if it were consistent throughout the majority of the album, but the truth is it's just not. You have an entire half of the album in the front that just doesn't make use of auto-tune whatsoever, and then you have the back half where the vast majority of it is auto-tune. It's just a complete tonal switch-up, and again, I have nothing against auto-tune in metal, but it simply just doesn't make sense to jump from one to the other suddenly with seemingly no purpose or any sense of transition whatsoever. It's just a complete and jumbled mess. Look, I think that there genuinely is a lot to admire here in terms of ambition and even downright fucking audacity at times, but at the same time, Life is But a Dream just feels like it has too many ideas going on for its own good, and instead of honing in on a couple of specific sounds that could have really given Avenged Sevenfold a solid avant-garde-esque or adjacent style for their own brand of melodic metal, they instead just kind of throw everything together and hope that something sticks. But the funny thing about that method of making music, or any form of art for that matter, is that generally speaking, nothing sticks, and that's exactly what happens on this record. The biggest flaws of the record, however, actually come in more small doses. Like I said before, things like the auto-tune vocal work or just the complete jumble of genres being experimented with here are interesting in nature and could have been executed well, but there are just a number of creative decisions here that are so small and seemingly insignificant that build up into something much more major over the course of the entire album's runtime that really drag every single aspect of this album down, every single genre experimentation, every single performance, every single everything. I mean, you have songs like G that take up this incredibly awful guitar tone that I guess wants to be semi-tropical, but in reality it sounds more like an instrument used to make the Wii Sports opening theme more than anything else. I really can't tell what they were going for there. I can only assume that they're trying to pull out their best Jimmy Buffett imitation while also doing a Voivod impression, while also doing their classic melodic metal kind of stuff, while also still partaking in the progressive metal sounds of their last studio album. I think you see what I'm getting at here. You have the track Death, which poorly manipulates a crooner-esque sort of style from M Shadows that ultimately just does not fit with the symphonic metal influences found on the rest of the track. You also have the song Nobody, which has some horrible horn section work that is meant to, again, evoke a sort of symphonic metal tone, but the production on the horns themselves is just horrible. It's so muddy, and it just overtakes everything else in the song the second that they appear. And you also have other tracks like Cosmic that simply go on for too long. It seems like every single song on this record is flawed here in different ways to varying degrees. They can't even settle on a single way to screw up the record. There's just no sense of solidarity here in any way. I mean, really, your album needs to seriously lack identity when I can't even define properly how you managed to mess up the album. Look, Life is But a Dream isn't an example of a band overstaying their welcome. If that were the case, then Avenged Sevenfold would just be kind of bothersome, a bit annoying, etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is that they don't overstay their welcome per se. Instead, it's their constant bouncing from one poor idea to the next that is genuinely exhausting to listen to, and already makes a bad album just more worse off. It's kind of comical in a way, but in a sad comical sort of way. It should go without saying at this point that these constant creative missteps cause Life is But a Dream to just feel disjointed at best, despite the fact that, again, I can, at least to some degree, admire the ambition, I suppose. But really, the most frustrating quality of the record, due to all of this jumbledness in regards to the genre experimentation, is the fact that none of the otherwise very talented members of Avenged Sevenfold managed to shine in any way. Hey, M Shadows can be a solid frontman with a good chunk of charisma behind him. Sinister Gates has always been a phenomenal shredder and multi-instrumentalist whose abilities have pretty consistently been used for the wrong band. What the right band for him would be, I have no clue, but it certainly is an Avenged Sevenfold. And meanwhile, you also have Johnny Christ as well as Brooks Wackerman, who hold their own in the rhythm section as bassist and drummer, respectively. Each musician within Avenged Sevenfold is incredibly talented in their own right. Life is But a Dream is already a mess, don't get me wrong. It wouldn't matter if all four members of the band delivered the best performances of their life. This would still be a weak album no matter what. But at the same time, this album bounces around so much from one concept to the next that there's no time for any given member of the band to show off their chops at all. And while it is unquestionably annoying that Life is But a Dream is completely incapable of rooting itself in a singular identity, it's even more disappointing that not a single member of the band behind it gets to shine at all, especially knowing that even on their weaker records, they're still capable of delivering some solid performances, just with weak material. Look, Avenged Sevenfold have never been the most adored band in the world or anything like that, and I'm certainly not going to pretend like they are, but at the same time, it's kind of easy to see why their diehard cult fanbase adores them as much as they do. Avenged Sevenfold consists of talented musicians that have, admittedly, in the past, shown themselves to be quite talented at really defining good melodies, good hooks, good choruses, and generally speaking, know how to structure a song very well and execute it with ease, even if, again, the song itself is not necessarily of the highest caliber in the world as far as mainstream metal goes. I'm not saying that every Avenged Sevenfold album is the best thing that you'll hear in your entire life, but nonetheless, it's hard to not at least appreciate the passion and effort to create a singular album that goes into the vast majority of the records found within their discography. That is, except sounding the seventh trumpet and Hail to the King. We don't talk about those ever. Ever. I digress. All of this is just completely thrown out of the window for the sake of Life is But a Dream, and its desire to be experimental, as well as its final result of just being a completely muddy mess. It's sort of like you wanted to create an amazing, unique soup, and instead of really planning things out recipe-wise, you just took all of the garbage on your kitchen shelf and just tossed it into a pot of water, and then you just said, hey, here it is, eat up. That's what this album is from a musical standpoint. It's just a total mess. And I know I've said that time and time again at this point in this review, but I truly cannot convey accurately just how all over the place this record is. While I would never feel comfortable calling this the worst metal album of 2023 up to this point, especially not when that new Sleep Token album exists, haha, I will say that I do find it incredibly disappointing to see Avenged Sevenfold go from a polarizing band that at least had a singular identity and a good idea of who they were, to a band that now really doesn't have any sort of reputation at all, positive or negative, but also has no idea who they want to be. I'm perfectly fine with them going in a more avant-garde experimental direction. In fact, I greatly congratulate them for going down that path. I think it's an interesting concept, and I think that they could pull off a record like Life is But a Dream if they just had a more solid grasp of what they wanted it to sound like, rather than just smashing together a bunch of different genres and subgenres of metal. So, to cut a long story short, latest Avenged Sevenfold album is a big no. That's it. I'm going to give this record 1.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. That is the end of this album review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.